everybody, and welcome to ABL Down on the Farm, episode 36, where we talk all things Dynasty baseball prospecting, but especially prospecting in the ABL, a 30-team Dynasty league with 20 minor league spots per team for a glorious 600 prospects. Always gives us a lot to talk about. I've got a great show tonight. Hopefully you'll like it. I've got our now veteran owner in the ABL, Evan, owner of the Houston Astros in year 2 for him. So without further ado, I'll bring Evan on. Hey, buddy, welcome back.
Glad to be back. Happy to be here. Hello, fellow prospectors.
There you go. There you go. So we got a jam-packed show. We're going to talk actually about some specific prospects tonight. And then I want to talk to you about your 2 Aaron Judge trades. Because one wasn't really a prospect trade.
Right.
But, we all read between the lines. You were getting him to flip him, and you did. And so I really want to talk about the return. And we'll get into the intricacies of that. But I think it's an interesting case study on how to effectuate a dump, which we were both doing this year in ABL. We're both punting for next year. So or hopefully
we're punting for something.
I think. Punting for the future. How far down the road that is, I'm not sure.
The future.
The future. All right, so, the theme of the first part of the show tonight is promotion. Young prospects getting promoted and playing above their age versus level, right? So they're very young for their respective level that they're at. And they each have kind of an interesting story. But the first one I want to talk about is Michael Arroyo. So this is my boy. He's one of my prospects in ABL. But I put on the screen here just some of his stats. He's 20 years old in AA. He was just promoted from high A. So still very young for the level. But as we're going to talk about as we go along the way here, he's actually one of the oldest guys for level versus the other prospects we're talking about. They're all 20-year-olds, except for Grant Taylor, who we'll get to in a minute. But this is a slash line in 306 plate appearances at high A. He literally just got promoted, so he doesn't have any meaningful at bats there. And what really stands out to me, and I'm interested in your take, is that on base percentage and slugging percentage. This is a guy. He's 5'8", 160. There's always I have his Baseball America scouting grades in the right-hand column there. He's got a 50 power grade, and people have been very hesitant to up his power grades. But you look at this kid; he's got a 244 ISO, and he's doing it in game. So, what are your thoughts on Arroyo and where he is right now, and kind of where do you think about him as being a prospect?
Yeah, I really like Michael Arroyo. Sort of always liked him as kind of an under the radar guy. Always overachieving for his age to level stuff, right? He's always been checking a lot of boxes. But for me personally, he's always had sort of some, I'm hesitant to say red flags, but just question marks for me.
Yeah.
Definitely a little bit of a smaller, weird body type for a middle infield guy. So I'm always hesitant with those particular prospects. Sure. And what they will eventually be in the majors and how helpful they're going to be from a fantasy standpoint. You really have to hit to stay in the lineup at second base and, be the type of prospect that you were coming up, which is a run producing sort of middle of the order type.
Right.
And, I think from what I've seen so far with Michael Arroyo, he definitely seems like that type of hitter, and I think he's going to be okay. He's a little bit undersized, and the main thing with him and Lazaro Montes, who also just got promoted with him from the same team to AA, is what everybody says about that high A Seattle park, which is one of the most hitter-friendly parks in the majors or in the minors. Yeah. I forget what the city is now for the high A Seattle, but that park. So when I see his on base and slugging, extremely high, it's good. I'm sort of more happy with seeing the 269 average. Just I do keep it pretty surface level with a prospect's stats. I'm really not the type of guy who like goes on Fangraphs and looks at all the underlying stuff for prospects. So sometimes if I'm really interested in seeing what's going on with a guy, I'll do that. But like with Arroyo, for example, like I kind of see everything I want to see on this screen right here. And just based on what I know about like the park factor of where he was, I would say it's a little bit inflated. And I think the bottom line for me is that the test is now for Michael Arroyo. Like you're really going to learn a lot as a 20-year-old going to this new, slightly more difficult park. I don't know if it's like a especially difficult park. I think it's in Arkansas, somewhere in Arkansas. But that's where you're going to really learn with him and with Lazaro.
Yeah.
How good they really are. Plus they're going to face Double-A pitching now.
Yep.
I love seeing him. I love seeing them pushing him up already as a 20-year-old in Double-A. It's really nice. So if he's producing, it's like really big for him. Like he's definitely like top 25 prospect type if he can really make it work there. So
yeah, no,
yeah,
you've raised a lot of interesting points, and some of them have been on my mind about him as well. I'm a big Arroyo fan. I have him in a couple leagues. I obviously traded $15 for Fab to get him in this league, so which I'm happy about still.
Yeah, that worked out.
Yeah, but his size has always been a concern. As part of the handbook that I put together every year, frame is a factor that I consider, and he's definitely too small and too short. Now, there are always outliers, and that I try not to based on ad hoc examples. Like we all know some of the shorter dudes you can really rake. There's a guy in Houston who seems pretty good to play second base.
Yeah.
But he has just produced at this level even in other parks. If you go back to his A-ball numbers, back in 2024 in 302 plate appearances in A-ball, 279, 404, and 500. With the 221 ISO. So I'm not saying he's going to continue to do that as he climbs the ladder, because I think the biggest thing you said to me is Double-A pitching, right? I think, the quality of the pitching really improves at Double-A. And, it continues to advance as you get up to Triple-A. But in Triple-A, you can start facing guys who maybe are past, their expiration date. Double-A, you're really getting some cream of the crop, sophisticated pitching. So I definitely agree. It's like a big test for him, whether he can continue to produce at this level. The other interesting thing I noticed looking at his stats line is the walk to strikeout percentages are pretty steady across every level. I mean, this seems to be the guy he is. Now, you typically will see some kind of spike in strikeouts when they go up to the next level. And then he tends to, and this is a pattern for him, it seems. Like he goes up, he struggles a little bit, finds his groove, and then a month or month and a half in, he's like clicking. And he kind of started out this season that way. So when you look at his 269 batting average, it started much lower, and then he picked it up. He's actually been doing quite well over the last month and a half, which is why they promoted him presumably.
Right.
But he's got a chance to get another 300 plate appearances,
right,
in Double-A. So I mean, I have it on the slide here. This is a guy who could maybe get a 2026 promotion to the majors, but I think it's more likely that he comes up in 2027. Is that consistent with how you look at him?
Yeah. 26. I think late next year is definitely.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That might be a realistic kind of expectation.
The problem is they have a lot of guys coming up through Seattle.
They do.
They have infield guys.
Yep.
But I don't know. With Arroyo's definitely, if I'm picking favorites from all of the Seattle names that are all really good names right now, he's on the upper side. He's definitely one of my favorites. He's way more arrow up than arrow down.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way about him.
Yeah.
One thing I don't have on here is he's not considered to be a very good fielder.
Right.
And if I recall correctly, he came up as a shortstop and moved over to second base, which is probably a lot better for his future. But there is this question about whether he's going to be able to consistently get at bats at the major league level if he doesn't, field well enough.
Yeah, definitely. I think second base helps him, though. I think
it does.
You could definitely see that team needing somebody like him at second base, and I think he's sort of like really checking the boxes of one of these like second base types that can hit for power a little bit, which like we've seen a bunch of those examples over the years, especially recently. So like I'm really not like worried about size or frame stuff with him. He's just always been hitting, and it's just really like I just want to see him prove it a little bit more against better players.
Yeah,
and see what happens, because Seattle also in the majors is a really tough place to hit.
It's a very hard park to hit in.
Yeah, Julio's been having a really hard time. A lot of players have had a hard time. So
yeah,
we'll see. But I like.
Yeah, look at Teoscar Hernandez, who's like a guy who skyrocketed as soon as he left. It was great before he went in, and then he comes out and it skyrockets, right?
Yeah, a lot of guys.
Yeah, it's a very tough park. And look, the log jam of players coming up their system also begs the question of whether he stays in Seattle.
Yeah, that's true. But we've sort of been waiting for Seattle to make one of these moves, and they haven't.
No,
like another team we might talk about.
Oh yeah, we're going to talk about them a little bit later on. All right. Well, so look, an interesting guy. I'd be interested to see if his power grade gets upgraded, up to a 55 or something in the off season. That's the thing I'm looking for.
So these BA grades here, that's 60 hit, 50 power.
Yeah, and 50 speed, and then 55 overall with like a high volatility score.
Right.
Yeah. So.
All right. I don't know. I might make it like more 55.
I felt the same way. That's what I was going to say. Yeah. I think he's probably closer to that than 60, but it'll just be interesting to see how they adjust. And that's their preseason rankings that I pulled up. All right. Well, let's talk about a guy I think that everybody wants to hear you talk about, which is our friend Grant Taylor.
In the majors.
In the majors.
That's right there.
Yeah, it does. In the majors. Now he's come up as a relief pitcher mostly, right? He only has 6 innings pitched, right, and 6 appearances, right. This does not include today.
Right.
And I talked about him earlier in the season, based on one scouting report I read about that was really questioning his command, and that's when he was starting in the minors. He transitioned to be, focusing on relief pitching, and they've like really rocketed him up to the majors. Right. I mean, he barely has pitched in the minor leagues.
Yeah, he skipped AAA.
Yeah. So directly from AA, very, exciting. And you can see his like walk rate at, AA. Again, only 26 innings. So you understand kind of like some of the concern that the scout was seeing. And then that's a little skewed because, his relief pitching, his command improved, which is not unusual. But huge strikeout rates. And, nobody questions his stuff. And then I put his like very small sample size ratios right there. And, that's obviously better. But we'll see if it holds, right? But you can kind of get away with a little bit of wildness as a relief pitcher, particularly as you're starting out. If you have that great stuff, you can just rear back and throw it. So, and the last thing I have on the slide here is he Mason Miller 2.0. So I'm wondering how you're feeling about Grant now. And I have you worshiping Grant over there in the corner. So
yeah, I'm looking at that picture, trying to figure out what's happening in that picture. I'll take that. I mean, It doesn't exactly look like me, but
no, it does not. But
AI.
AI. There you go. There you go.
Really trust it.
So how are you feeling about Grant, and how are you feeling about his value relative to what you acquired him for?
Well, listen, that value relative to what I acquired him for, feeling great, loving that.
Yeah, and just for the record, you got him for $1 off the waiver.
Yes, I picked him up because I read something about him. Somebody said that he was really looking good on a backfield after recovering from Tommy John, right? Yeah. Like Grant Taylor was on the team with Paul Skeens. I think he was on the LSU team with Paul Skeens. I think he was originally there I don't remember how they do it in college. There's the Friday night starter, the Saturday night starter, right? Whoever the premier starter was, Grant Taylor was that. Then he goes down, has surgery in college, and that's his draft year. So he slips in the draft or whatever.
Yep.
So as he's coming back, he starts getting some buzz, and I figured I would take a shot on him. And the people who were talking about him, I really trusted them, and I just said, why not? So I added him everywhere, and it just worked out, really, honestly. I did not think that there would ever be these pitch cards with his stuff plus top 100 prospect. That was not the plan. But I was, very excited for him at the start of the year as this extremely fast rising prospect, which is really the goal. That's always what I'm looking for.
Definitely. If you can get into major leagues and start adding
something I've really been thinking about with my Dynasty fantasy playing here is time. Time is money. And if I'm going to be this clued in on prospects, why am I waiting? I don't want to wait for anybody. So I'm just sort of disregarding the DSL this year, for example, right, is not exciting. But even if it was exciting, there's too many other guys that I'm interested in who are 24, and that works. They'll be up in a year. I don't feel like waiting for anybody. So it all sort of coalesced for Grant Taylor. They skip AAA with him. That was a big surprise. I think they called him up on the Roman Anthony call-up day. Loved very much. And so in the majors, I have no idea what they're doing with him. They're starting him. They're teasing him as a closer. They're using him as a closer. Today he pitches 2 innings in relief in a non-save situation. I was listening to some recent interviews with, there's an interview with a White Sox or maybe Bannister. I think he's the pitching coordinator. I don't think he's the GM. Somebody just talking very glowingly about Grant Taylor and also saying that basically we are aware of his injuries and what can happen to him. And, because of that, we are using him a certain way. We're treating him a certain way. So I have to believe that it's all really according to a very specific plan that they have. And they're trying to avoid messing him up and having him miss time, especially in light of him, coming off of the surgery. I'm not worried about anything regarding his command. I always throw away the command immediately after surgery. Not that he's immediately after the surgery, but I think he's still working up.
Yeah,
he does not have a lot of minor league experience at all, even, and I think they're just babying him very much, and it's hard to say what it means. Why take this particular player and baby him to this extent? What are you planning on doing? You could tell me that they're doing this because they want to make him a starter next year, or you could tell me that they're doing this because they want him to be Mason Miller, or you can tell me they're doing this because they have some crazy plan to deploy him in all sorts of different ways. I really don't know. The bottom line for me is that he's getting points.
Yes.
And that works for me.
Yeah.
That actually matter in a major league game. And he is not a pitching prospect anymore, which is not a real thing, as we all know. He is a major league pitcher, giving me points on my team. And that I like that. So whatever, for $1 right now, whatever happens. And
That's right. So, his path to the majors is similar to Mason Miller's, who was a guy with, just has electric stuff and had arm injuries and, issues, and was being eased back, a lot of durability questions. So in ABL, I drafted him in the auction draft, and nominated him for $1, ended up getting him for $3. And the idea was well, geez, I thought he might be a starter. That might be a way to steal a really cheap starter in the ABL, which is, as you know, is a huge thing because the pitching is so expensive in ABL. when you go to the auction, at least. And then the A's kind of brought him along in a very similar fashion. They eased him into the middle relief role, put him in some leverage situations. He eventually found his way to be a closer. And then the big question in the offseason was, he going to end up back in the rotation, or were they going to keep him in the bullpen? And obviously they elected to keep him in the bullpen. And I remember the day they announced it, I was kind of pissed because I was I thought I had a starting pitcher. Now he's a relief pitcher, and he still provides value, right? Yeah. But there is a distinction in terms of the quality of the pitcher and the value to your team, a starter versus a relief pitcher, because they pitch 1 or 2 innings, they can pitch more days a week. But the way the scoring system is, structured, starting pitchers are just a lot more valuable. So I think, to me, it's this acquisition cost you have at $1 of FAB is just fabulous, right? Yeah. I guess you'll have a contracted decision to make in a couple of years, but good for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's SPRP right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, a lot of flexibility. Yeah. You can.
They're extremely similar to Mason Miller. I think Mason Miller had better stuff. I think he was a better pitcher, frankly. But they both had injuries. I think Mason Miller's injuries were a bit more severe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember if Mason Miller had surgery or not. I think he had surgery.
Yeah, he had surgery. He missed time. As a guy whose draft stock also got hit, and
Yeah.
And
for me with Mason Miller, I always thought of it as they decided this guy cannot start or he's going to blow out. Whereas with Grant Taylor, it feels more let's see what happens. Let's see where we're at the end of the season, what we've got here, and then make a decision for next year.
Yeah. One last point on Taylor and the White Sox babying him. I have a couple White Sox pitchers in various leagues, Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith. And as I follow those guys along, there's a lot of criticism that I've read and heard about the White Sox and how they break pitchers in. And this concept of just really babying them along and what it does to their development. And the comments I heard most recently, actually on a Baseball America podcast, were about Noah Schultz. And they're finally trying to stretch him out. And he's in AAA.
Yeah.
Right. At the time this conversation was happening, it was AA, but they're trying to get him to 4 or 5 innings.
Right.
Right. After refusing to allow him to pitch. He hit a pitch count. And they pull him out of the game. Right.
Yeah.
And what they were saying about his command issues this year was that it was a product of not being used to pitching that many innings and just losing his command, right? And that stuff is still there, but he has to learn to get through the order a second or third time, and be able to just throw that many pitches. So are they stunting the development of these guys? And when do they get ready for the majors? Really,
it's really tricky to say. I mean, what stunting? What would make you think it's stunting? They would say it's the opposite of stunting.
Yeah, I would say that to be in the major league rotation, right? You're going to have to be able to go at least 6 innings. That's the idea, right? I mean, you should be able to. Well, fair. I mean, I feel that's got to be the goal, right? I mean, right? I mean, so how many years before he's at that level?
Yeah.
Right. If you're only letting him pitch, he's up into AA already. Now you're letting it 4 or 5 innings. It's it takes time, and learning how to control your delivery and how to get hitters out the second or third time and through the lineup. Those are all important maturation skills.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know how many opportunities he's had to do that relative to guys who are just being allowed to pitch.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think I asked the question because I know that there really isn't a straight answer to it.
Yeah.
I think you have to kind of learn how to pitch in the 5th inning and the 6th inning. Right? That's sometimes that's its own kind of thing. Your third time through the order, what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it'll be an interesting question. We'll see if, Noah Schultz gets called up this year. Hagen Smith had, some arm issues this year, so he's probably, going to be even further behind. But, Schultz just got promoted to AAA, so I'm really interested to see what he does there.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So I think he had 5 strikeouts in his first outing, but was mixed. Anyway, let's talk about one of my favorite prospects in all of baseball. This is Sam Basallo. And this guy is like, lighting up AAA. He's 20 years old. Okay, so we saw Michael Arroyo, 20 at AA. That was exciting. This guy was in AAA at age 19, and now he's 20, right? He's got 200 plate appearances this year, and his numbers in June are like off the charts, right? So this is his season totals: 268, 375, 583, and that 14.5% walk rate. I got his ISO 315. That's absurd. That's crazy.
All these numbers are crazy.
Yeah. Max exit velocity, max 90th percentile exit velocity, or average, I should say. He's like exceeding major league standards on these StatCast metrics. And again, he's 20.
Yeah.
At AAA. And we were kibitzing in the Discord about how he's never faced a pitcher who's younger than he is.
Right.
So, the big debate right now with Sam is he going to get promoted, right? And so now the Orioles organization, which is wallowing in misery, right? And has a bunch of veterans we all know they're going to trade, right? Like, how long is Ryan O'Hearn on this team? How long is Mountcastle on this team, right? We all know it's coming, right? This is an organization that has like called up Jackson Holiday at 19. They called up Colby Mayo like early, sent him back down. Both those guys back down. Now they're both back up. They gave Cowser a cup of coffee, right? He's back up. They there's a laundry list of guys they've been calling up and sending down. And they still got other young players in the minors, right? Like, when are they going to call this kid? And so now the fans are aggravated. The press is starting to ask questions. And the Orioles PR department can't figure out why he's not getting called up, right? So first they say he's going to have to break the door down.
Right.
Okay.
Hasn't done it yet.
Yeah, and that obviously doesn't make any sense. Like, what are you talking about? Look at those numbers. Like, he's breaking the door down. I mean, meanwhile, Jock gets called up after a handful of at bats and a few home runs, right? So this kid has got actual minor league time and he's destroying it, right? So that's not it. So now we're hearing he needs more time to catch, right? And more specifically about how to call games. Okay. Do you think he's going to be a catcher, Evan?
No, I don't.
I don't either. Because they have this guy called Adley.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to catch. So Sam's probably going to play first base when Mountcastle gets traded, right? This just all strikes me as an element of service time manipulation, right? And an element of just not admitting that we don't have room to play him every day because we have too many old dudes that we have to get rid of. That's what's going on.
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't need more time to learn how to catch. I mean, would he benefit from that? Sure. But if the Orioles were really, really concerned about him learning to play the game, they wouldn't have advanced him to AAA at age 19. What are we talking about? You think he's being fast-tracked up to the AAA so he can learn? Have him hang out in AA. I don't get it, right?
Correct.
To me, it's just an example of baseball front offices thinking the fans are idiots. Come on.
I'm looking to see where he's playing tonight. He's playing first base.
Yeah.
He's got three walks.
Yeah. So he's
I was going to say, I wonder, I don't follow Basallo very much, mostly because I don't have any of Basallo on any of my teams. I missed that boat. Love him as one of my favorite prospects. I would say there's only a handful of prospects where I would really not want to trade them.
Yeah.
And I think he's one of them. I would not want to trade him. I wonder if they want him to play first base more. And I don't know how much. I really couldn't tell you how much he's catching, how much he's playing first, how much he's DHing. I know that he like broke in as a catcher, is this very big dude, and clearly looks like a first base masher type. And I wonder if they want him to get more first base reps, frankly, because maybe he doesn't have that experience. I cannot figure out the Orioles. I've said it before that I think they totally dropped the ball with this entire prospect thing that they've had. I don't know what they thought was going to happen with their pitchers. Like, why did you not trade? You made the Corbin Burns trade, but like then you didn't sign him.
Yeah. I mean, and now he's out the year, unfortunately, for Corbin. But
yeah, they definitely dodged a bullet there, and they didn't really give up too much from their really good stock of prospects.
Yeah, we can talk about that for a second too. Just one last thought on Basallo, which is that he had an elbow injury earlier in the year, which is why he was playing more first base than catcher. But and the Orioles have more recently started to break him in at catcher again for the year. So his catching is been pretty evenly split, as I recall, like the last couple weeks.
Okay.
And you can see he's got good arm strength, and he can really throw runners out. Because I've seen clips of that. But he can also play first base. I don't think fielding is ultimately going to be a problem for this kid.
And it shouldn't really matter anyway. The guy's 20 years old and has a 115 or 116 max exit velocity.
That's insane.
How is he going to hit when he's actually in his prime?
I know, right? I mean,
he's like 5 years away from his prime.
Yeah, it's scary.
He's really a fantastic hitter.
No, he's got just tremendous power, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. He will get up to the majors. I mean, the question to me is like, is he going to get up, in 2026? Or is he like? Are the Orioles finally going to call him up later this year?
I was going to say you cannot predict what the Orioles are going to do, but if I had to guess, I think that they're going to realize they're in bad shape for the second half. They're going to trade all the guys they want to trade, Cedric Mullins, Mountcastle, and bring up some guys and just give them like one last look at like what they've got before they figure out 2026, right?
Yeah,
and I think Basallo, he has to be a part of that.
Yeah. So here's the interesting over/under to me, right? Because I've seen this play out, this narrative about like, the prospect needs more time. He's got to learn to brush his teeth. He's got to do this. He's got to do that. Like all this like nonsense, right? I mean, by the way, Basallo's been catching his whole career, right? I think he can catch.
Yeah.
And by the way, like these guys don't come to the majors. None of them do as finished products.
Right.
They don't. Right?
You're right. Of course.
Right? So they learn on the job, right? They all do, right? It's like, I mean, do you think like Nick Kurtz or Jock, like, is a finished product?
The one thing I'll say about that is if you're catching, that's hard. That's if you're like learning on the job as a catcher and figuring out major league hitting, as a 20-year-old, like that can be a lot.
Oh yeah, 100%. And look, there's a reason in the handbook while I ding catchers as prospects.
Right.
I have a position factor, and they're the lowest scoring, and the reason, well, besides pitchers, but they're the lowest position player scoring, and the reason, as I stated earlier in the season, is that it takes time to develop them. So I get it, and if I really believe he was going to be a catcher, like I would give this more credence, but I just don't believe it. Like, correct. This is the first baseman of the future for the Orioles that we're looking at.
I don't even really see him being like the off-day catcher for Adley. I don't really understand.
Probably not.
Right. I don't know why they would do that.
I don't know. I mean, you can put them both in the lineup. I mean, they can have a backup catcher. I mean, he could be an emergency catcher.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
But another thought on the Orioles, or because you raised the topic of like, what the heck's going on down in Baltimore, right?
Yeah.
It's always striking to me that they've been extraordinarily good at developing and acquiring young prospect hitters, and been really lousy about their pitching staff.
Yeah.
I mean, Grayson Rodriguez has been like just a disaster. His career is it's not over. I mean, he can still turn it around and be good, but like, they have nobody coming up.
Right.
I mean, it's a problem.
It is a problem. I really I could never figure it out. And They figured out one thing, which was like they were never in on like the Latin American players, right? They were always famous for like they didn't even have a guy that they would send to the Dominican, right?
Yeah.
And they like turned that around. Basallo being like the poster boy of that.
Yeah.
And now they have really no pitching at all. I really thought they were going to trade somebody for a pitcher. I really like the thought of that Dylan Cease trade. That was a rumor where they would send Kobe Mayo, something like that. That seemed like a perfect thing.
Yeah, I'm surprised they haven't, acquired Basallo.
Right, and all while these hitters have really depreciated and like gotten worse, frankly. Kierstad is like maybe not a major leaguer. Kobe Mayo, I've joked about in the past, not really being a major leaguer. We'll see. But like you could argue that these are not major leaguers,
Yeah, I get that argument. Look, they've got Dylan Beavers down, in AAA, and he's been playing better. But they've got a lot of hitters that they could trade for minor league prospects, for pitching. All right. I mean, they could also trade for
major league pitchers.
Yeah, but I think they really need some young talent like in their system on the pitching side. I mean, they have McDermott, who has got his own command issues, but other than that, I'm not there are no guys that excite me down there.
I can't name a guy.
Yeah.
And I could usually name a guy.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah,
it's a problem. All right. Well, enough about my favorite prospect in baseball right now, Basallo. I think it's just a lot of fun to watch hit and just talk about. But another guy who just got promoted that I wanted to talk about was Bryce Eldridge, who was a very fun pick when he was his draft year. Former pitcher, first baseman, outfielder now. His handbook score was really high this year. He was the 11th overall prospect. And just as a note, going back to Basallo, I had him 18. I bet you they flip if they're still both in the minors next year in terms of where they're ranked. But that'll be interesting. Just promoted to AAA, 20 years old, another 20-year-old. All right, only 67 plate appearances. He's kind of unsurprisingly, given his makeup and profile, struggled a little bit out of the gate. Not surprised. 31% strikeout rate. Good ISO still, and you can see his exit velocity is excellent. I mean, the guy's real power. I think the question has always been his hit tool, and how long it'll take him to be a major league hitter. But unfortunately, he gets up to AAA and he hurts his hamstring.
Yeah,
and he's out a month. And so what I wanted to talk to you about and get your impression on is how damaging is that in your eyes to him, as a prospect in the dynasty context, right? Because, we're talking about a guy we wanted to see the majors and get up here, and, there's a certain hype element to it all, right? And now he's out for a month. It'll kind of fall to the back page 6, right? And people forget about him in a sense, not a hard forget, but they'll just talk about other prospects, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe his trade value depreciates if you're looking to move him. Maybe you're counting on him to be coming up this year or later in the year. Now that's on the back burner. I mean, maybe he comes up late in the year in September, maybe, right? But he's losing a month of play. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's not great. I think Bryce, he's dealt with other injuries as well.
Right, that's another factor.
He's like a guy. He's a bigger guy. Multiple soft tissue kind of injuries to this point. Hit tool questions. It's not my favorite type of prospect to hold on to. I had Eldridge in ABL. I traded him in that trade for the first pick in the draft. That was a trade that I thought was very even on both sides, possibly even a loss for me. But I just really wanted to have the first pick, and I got Colson Montgomery back in that trade, who's been a huge disappointment.
Yes,
but that was really just thinking that he would be up very soon. And the White Sox, but
he played his way right out of a promotion.
Yeah, no, he might get a shot again. Eldridge, I always liked him when I traded him.
Yeah,
part of my thinking was first base, and specifically first base in ABL, where I could either have it figured out with a prospect or plan for it in the auction, right?
Yep.
You sort of have options. And I felt like I would be able to figure out first base. And so I could trade away Eldridge and get somebody like Travis Basallo that I had really liked at the time, who I wanted to have as like a middle infield, kind of play around with the middle infield stuff.
Yep. No, I mean, terrific prospect.
I still really like Eldridge. I think you're right that it's like a setback for him developmentally. And there's just like other things working against him. I really don't like him in San Francisco. Really tough park there. And just like his like body type with the injuries and the hit tool stuff, you just know that they want to see more in the minors before they promote him, especially at this point, to promote him to the majors.
Yeah.
They want to really see, he's like a bigger first base guy who like struggles with spin, and that's always like, I don't know. They're going to
have a little bit of that at the major league level.
Yeah. And like that's like tough to figure out at the major league level. Like you really need to be there in the minors, seeing all those pitches, figuring out what to do with those pitches, like over an extended period before you have a shot at, facing a major leaguers.
Yeah. Well, unless you're Sam Basallo, but yeah.
Yeah. Right. Eldridge doesn't have Basallo's hit tool.
No,
he really doesn't.
No.
But there's a lot to like about Bryce Eldridge still. I would not like give up on him by any means. I think you do have to wait, and I think that you will like eventually see that reflect in like a drop in his rankings. For example.
I think that's coming. And in some ways, it has nothing to do with the skill set, but like the lost time has a tendency to drop in ratings, which is one of the reasons I don't really rely on the ratings themselves and putting the handbook together. Because it doesn't mean it doesn't have great power still. Now, if his performance doesn't match that, that's a separate question.
Yeah.
But you raised an interesting thing to me, which is the first base position issue, which is another position I ding in the handbook. One of the reasons I chose to do that was because you can kind of find first baseman. And as I said earlier in the year, like a lot of players who can't play other positions end up at first base.
Yeah.
Right. So there actually is like a lot of competition for that position, and you can be the odd man out. I mean,
it's weird with first base. Like you think about it, like it's always traditionally been very deep. But if you think about it, there really aren't that many first basemen that you like can really trust from like a dynasty team perspective, where you're just going to like have your guy for years and years. There really aren't too many if you start counting them off. The difference in ABL is that you have like people coming and going in availability. Like you'll have contracts that expire. You'll have these, you'll have so many prospects to pick from to use, and the league is so deep that it kind of like doesn't matter if you're plugging in some like other position who has first base eligibility for a while, and plus it's a points league. So, ABL offers you a lot of options as far as that goes, different from like some other like regular keep forever dynasty league, where I think you really want to be able to just like have a set it and forget it first baseman.
Yeah, that's a good point. The format of the league you're in really affects the value of these positions. And I think in ABL you can really find a first baseman through a variety of avenues, and you just named a whole bunch of them, right?
Yeah.
And guy picks up position eligibility in our league pretty quickly.
Right.
It's a very low minimum games, and
right.
You played first base a couple times. Here you go.
Yeah.
Which is it's another interesting thing about Basallo. Just going back to him for a hot second, if he ends up having dual eligibility at catcher and first base, even if he just catches like 10 games a year or whatever it is, like
gold.
That's gold, right? I mean, like, now you can like just forsake catching.
Yes.
Right. You don't have to ever worry about a catcher again, right? You just like sign him to a contract. He's playing first base. you're good, right? Yeah. All right. So enough about these prospects for a moment. I want to talk about a little bit like trading action. All right. So you went about announcing that you were going to dump. Okay. As I did too, right? So that, and we're all gearing up for June 1st and the dump date, and it's going to be very exciting. And then you turn around and you trade for Aaron Judge. Okay. Yes. And when you did this, I was like, oh, geez, the other shoe's going to drop, right? So what I want to talk about, right, is first your decision to go for Judge, and to the extent you remember what you gave up, in order to get Judge.
Yeah, let me look at that.
I mean, we can pull that up, but like,
yeah, right. What I remember happening was Frank had Judge, right?
Yep.
And Frank just put him on the block, and I really just like threw my hat in the ring. I was like, hey, Frank, I really like this player. I would like to know what you're looking for, right? Like, I really was just like, then let's just see what happens here. And as I started thinking about it more after that, I started thinking like I could maybe have some fun with this. And so it really wasn't like I'm going to trade for Aaron Judge right now because I have some master plan to trade him for whatever, I really just, because also at that time I had Pete Alonso on my team, and something I'm learning with ABL is that I really prefer to not think. Like, I want to just like do something and react to it and like see what happens, because it's just everything is so close and there's so many variables and things. Like when I traded for Judge and I had Alonso and Judge and a few good pitchers, I was thinking, do I like actually have a shot at like getting to the playoffs and like being pretty good?
Right.
And so like that thought was in my mind for a while, but then I like looked at the standings and tried to get a real like lay of what I had here. And I just after I traded for Judge, I then made the decision that like I'm going to try to build for something a little more sustainable, because if I was going to keep Judge and Alonso, I was going to want to trade for more pieces. I'm just going to want to buy, right?
Yeah.
And I just didn't really want to do that. I didn't want to, because also I feel like I have good enough pieces to buy good stuff.
Yeah. So the guys who gave up in the deal, by the way.
Yeah.
You gave up Carlos Rodon.
Right.
Brandon Sprott.
Yep.
And Mike Soraka. Okay. So Sprott is a guy you acquired last year, if I remember correctly.
That is correct.
He was like the throw-in a deal that you did that I really liked. And at the time, he was like kind of a rising prospect. He's getting a lot of buzz, and he had a step back this year. So like you moved on from him. Right. Any thoughts on that beyond what I've just articulated?
No, that was basically it. Sproat, I liked him last year. He was way on the rise. When I traded him this year, he was kind of mediocre and was sort of becoming to me an expendable pitching prospect type. Like he still had the name value and he's still pretty good, but like if you're Brandon Sproat at that point and you're not like the first name called for the Mets when there's an injury, I'm not interested. I don't have time. I don't want to have time.
You want to trade me all your DSL prospects, that's fine.
Listen, I don't know how many I have. I don't think I have a lot.
Yeah, I only have one guy who's playing in the DSL right now. So only because he got assigned to it again.
Yeah, I actually do have a guy who's a DSL repeater guy.
Yeah,
I didn't know that when I added him.
Yeah,
but he's playing pretty well. But anyway.
It's annoying. Well, they usually do when they repeat.
Right.
All right, so
pitchers. He just became like a pitching prospect to me, a decent one, but like one that I could throw in a trade and not feel so bad about seeing him go.
All right, so let's talk about the flip, right?
Yes.
So this is your trade, where you traded both guys, Pete Alonso and Aaron Judge. And just for context, this is not a hold forever dynasty league. They have huge contracts. They're not really keepable pieces, or they shouldn't be keepable pieces going into next year. They'll go back into the auction pool. So these are rentals basically for the rest of the season. And this is the haul that you got back. I didn't include the fab you got. But I think you also got $11 in fab, which is almost Michael Arroyo money.
It is almost Arroyo money.
Right? So, and Mullins is an interesting guy who's got some value in this league. He's not, that price is perfectly fine. It'd be $12 next year. Fine. So if he's getting it back, that's fine, right? McLean is actually an interesting get to me, because he's starting to show something maybe at the plate. A lot of injury issues with this kid, right? Yeah. But you're not bound to him. You'll be able to flip him if you wanted to. But talk to me about the 3 pitchers you got.
Yes, 3 pitching prospects I really like.
Yeah.
Travis Sakura is maybe my favorite pitching prospect right now. I mean, he is a little if you're doing tiers, he's probably right at the bottom of the first tier for me. He's a little bit younger, a little further away, but just absolutely dominant numbers. Looks like a horse type.
Yep.
Looks very skeensy, just physically. I was watching some of his start yesterday. It was the free game on MILB, so I was watching some of it. Love Sakura very much. Have been trying to get him from the Nationals since last year.
Yep.
They knew that. This trade was originally just a Pete Alonso trade with Sakura and I think Cal Steven. I think that was going to be the trade before the dump day. And then right around June 1, when everything was buzzing, I was thinking about, wait, can I do an Alonso and Judge thing with Washington? Yeah. I feel like they're going to love that.
Yeah.
And as soon as I started thinking about it, I get a message from Jordan and Sim on Discord being what do you think about a Judge and Alonso thing? And I was like, yeah, let's go. Let's do this.
Love it. Love it. The plan comes together.
It really did. And those guys are fantastic. Love talking to those guys and dealing with them.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun to deal with.
So Sakura is really the star for me of the 3 pitching prospects. Cal Steven, I also do really like. Great numbers this year. Also a college pitcher. I really like that. And I like what Toronto's doing with some of their pitchers. They have Ye Savage, who's really the star over there. But I like the pedigree with Cal Steven and putting it together in the minors this year. And Legrange is my Yankee guy. I think I had him before.
I had him too.
Maybe you had him.
Yeah. We went back and forth with it last year.
Yes. Absolutely awful start tonight. Don't think about that. Yeah. He's recently promoted to AA. But also another guy, buzzy kind of pitcher, having a great year.
I think really let's pause on him for a second because he's obviously a guy you and I have been interested in for a while. A great frame, throws the ball really hard, has very interesting stuff. Last year's command was just awful. Yeah, just awful. I mean, unspeakably bad.
Right. Well, he was a reliever.
Yeah, he had an injury issue too, but but basically just couldn't find the plate consistently. And he's really turned it around this year. His on his promotion, his walk rate went back up a little bit, but nowhere near the disastrous levels it was at before. So I think it's something to watch because if he can find the plate, he's got tremendous upside in the rotation. And he may end up being a relief pitcher. But he's an interesting guy. Steven's an interesting guy to me too, because I didn't love the level assignment he got initially. So I was really glad to see him promoted. Yeah. And if you're really interested to see if you can keep it up. So when you got a 22-year-old dominating a lower level, I'm okay, great. Particularly a college pitcher. I'm I kind of expect this, but now I want to see him kind of up level and continue to do it. And I think this is going to be an interesting test for him the rest of the way. So he could be, a very interesting gem in that. And again, like I know you and I were talking on Discord a little while ago about kind of pitching in ABL and just the tremendous cost in the auction that we all face. And like, I think we're both loading up on minor league pitchers. And, for me, it's like a real volume approach.
It's exactly what I was going to say. I think the main drawing point for me with this trade was getting 3 more pitching prospects in my, roster here who I liked,
Yep.
I could fill up my prospect pit. Like I also 100% volume, just give me a bunch of pitchers who cost nothing, who, and I'll figure it out. People might want them later.
Yep.
They might be extremely valuable for me. They might be depth for me. They might be Grant Taylor for me. They might be relievers, whatever. Right.
Yep.
But just like having them is so valuable.
Yeah.
So, like these are mine. They're not yours.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm going to hoard them.
Yeah. I've got 11 of them on my roster.
Yeah. And so, but so I can do that with random names, or I can do it with guys that I like and trust and read about. And so that's what I really liked about this, was that I was grabbing 3 more pitching prospects that I knew something about and liked.
Yep. I'm looking at your roster right now, and like you also have 11 minor league pitchers.
Yeah, it's like crazy to me sometimes when I look at it, but the youngest one is Sakura, who's 21.
Yep.
And I could name 3 or 4 of these that I think are going to get a shot in this year, 2025.
Yeah.
And that works for me too, to like free up minor league spots, to add more people for the draft, whatever the case may be.
Yep. It's got a lot of value.
That's really the strategy. I'm not trying to like hide anything.
Yep. I have a very similar approach. And I just got my first trade inquiry about Coleman Crow. Which I was like, all right, somebody's like reading about it finally. Okay, like it's always good when like the hype level is starting to pick up, and it's all relative to who the prospect is. But like, all right, somebody's like reading what I read like before the draft when I picked them up in the 5th round. Like, okay, great.
Yeah, it is what it is. Just gotta do it.
All right, so one of my favorite things to talk about is crushes and fades. So what do you got for me, Evan?
Crushes and fades. Yes, I do like some prospects. This is always hard for me because I can just like talk about like really so many of them. I will say like the crush for me on my team, like I had been associated with Jesus Made for a while. I still like Jesus Made, but I really love his teammate Luis Pena, who I got at the same time. Another exactly the same thing, skipped, DSL domination, right? I think he hit like over 400. I remember last year I was following him and Jesus Made like every day. I was really trying to follow Jesus Made's box scores just because everybody was talking about him. And you couldn't not see Luis Pena also like hitting better. And he's just a guy, he's like not even ever had a slump, really. If you look at his like I've been following like almost every one of his games, right? Because I'm like crazy and I look at box scores like every day. I look at these players' lines. Like during the season, like I will follow the Yankees and prospects. Like that's what I follow. Like I pay attention to what's happening in Major League Baseball. Like I guess that's interesting. But like what I'm checking for every day are Yankees and prospects. Yeah. And so you follow Luis Pena every day is 2 hits, 3 hits, stolen bases like crazy. Even now he's hitting home runs. You read about his EVs are higher. Yep. So, he has some warts. He doesn't really have like a good position in the field for him. He's sort of like stuck at second base because there are better options on the left side of the infield.
Michael Arroyo, anybody?
Right, exactly. But just like really everything you want from like a hitter prospect for fantasy. In general, really, but also especially for fantasy. So definitely one of my biggest crushes for sure.
That's a good one. He can play. He can play.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. I have 0 shares. I missed out on that boat, but really,
All right. Well,
really good ball player.
it happens.
It does. It does, sadly.
I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a pitcher. There's so many pitchers now that I like. I said somewhere Tyson Harden from Milwaukee, another Brewer, is like my Grant Taylor for this year. Nice. I do really like him. He's a guy I added everywhere. I think I heard like Jeff Ponce say he has like one of these unique fastballs, and his numbers have been great. He's a little bit older, just got promoted to Double-A. Biggest thing there for me is that I really trust the Milwaukee pitching stuff. He's another one of these like Brewers pitchers who I have a lot of confidence will like be something in the majors. So he's like one of my pitching crushes.
That's great. I like him too. That's a good one. So what do you got for me on the fade side?
Yeah, fade. I'll give you a good fade who is like, you wouldn't think he's so bad on the surface, but Felton Celestin from the Mariners, who's still like a pretty sexy name. He's batting like, I don't know, like 270, 280, something in there, but he hits for like no power. He's not like the best shortstop. Basically, he's a fade for me because I really wanted him to be this like Tatis type of prospect, one of these like power hitting, twitchy shortstop, bigger guy who just like is on that path, moves very quickly, and lives up to his huge bonus, right? His international signing bonus. And he's basically the opposite of that. He's really just a middle infield prospect who they need to see more out of, is kind of like not close to a promotion. I guess maybe he might be close since Seattle's promoting people at the moment. And maybe I think he probably gets bumped up to high A at the end of the year. But, it's just like not what I expected from Celestin. And it's just like not exciting anymore. And with that type of prospect, I really want something exciting.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. I think acquisition cost is another factor there, right? There are a lot of people who drafted him quite high during his draft year. I was a big fan of Celestin coming out, but I only have him in one league, which is Forge. Actually, I get him in ACL now too because he was drafted. I inherited him in ACL.
That is true. Yes.
Right. But I refused to draft him like at the level he was being drafted at in most of my leagugues, and I can't remember in Lorge why I ended up like getting him. He was the best player on the board when I drafted him, I guess. Or maybe I decided I just wanted him in one league,
right?
And so I just took him. But I agree with you. Like I think there's like inklings of him being good. There are things there that you like, but they're not like wowing you, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like he's a 270 something. Let me look at his numbers.
Yeah, I haven't looked at his stats recently.
I just know that he's like, he hits for average. He like, can get on base a little bit, but 285, right? So 285 average this year, but a 716 OPS. You know what I mean? So he can hit, but like there's no impact there really. And, I just think it really like dims his star a little bit.
Yeah, so I pulled up his numbers on FanGraphs. He's got like 241 plate appearances, 21 strikeout percentage, 7.5 walks. His slash line, his slugging percentage is anemic. He's got a 0.95 ISO.
Right.
And you look at his numbers at the CPX, which is kind of like a very tough league to gauge.
He was amazing, right?
Yeah, right. He was awesome, right? So that was 2024. You compare him to a guy like Basallo, and like, that guy's 20 in AAA.
Right.
Right. He's 19 in A ball.
That's what you wanted Celestin to be.
Right. And you look at a guy like Leo DeVries, the San Diego.
Same thing.
Right. He jumped right to A ball. Right. Skipped the DSL altogether. As Celestin did. Celestin has injuries too. He had a hamstring injury. that really stunted his growth. So, I think the real question is he going to develop any power? 6'1", 175.
Yeah.
It's a decent.
I think from what I remember reading or hearing about him, like he does have the power in there, but he's one of these like a lot of ground ball guys.
Yeah.
He needs to like do like a swing change, launch angle adjustment, because like he has it in him. I think he's a switch hitter also, so he's probably like better from one side.
Yeah, he's got 50%, 49.4% ground ball rate. Right?
Yeah, right. So so it's just clear, right? They're gonna like need to see the changes before he moves along, and it's just going to be a slower process for him.
Probably that's right. The interesting thing is the Mariners have actually done a nice job of developing young hitters. We were talking about some of them, earlier in the show, and he might get the coaching he needs to like change the launch angle, adjust the position. One thing you don't know about any of these guys, is how coachable they are.
Yeah.
Right. I get the impression, I could be wrong, that a guy like Michael Arroyo is like really coachable, right? And he's like really dedicated to doing what he's doing. I have no idea on this kid. He could be like a gym rat. I don't know. But like that's with all these young players, particularly 19-year-olds, like you just have no idea what their work ethic is, what their approach is, whether they listen.
Yeah.
And that could be so big, in their development.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so really interesting prospect, but I agree with you. His case is, the luster's a little bit gone. So what you're saying is you're going to trade him to me.
Possibly.
All right, we'll have to work on that.
Yeah.
A good time.
No trades on the show. Not yet.
It hasn't happened yet. I'm still waiting for the first trade on the show. But all right, maybe we'll have you back on later on just to do the trade on the show.
Okay.
Well, listen, buddy, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. I know you had a busy day like I did, so always good to talk baseball and have you in. And we'll have you on again. Looking forward to see what Grant Taylor does. Aren't
we all?
I know. It's going to be the talk of the town in ABL. So thanks for coming on, and for everybody watching at home, remember to ABP, always be prospecting.